Today we're going to be talking about the BenQ EX3501R 35-inch curved ultrawide display. The EX3501R is well appointed with a 3440 by 1440 resolution, VA panel with LED backlight, 300 nits of brightness, 2500 to 1 contrast ratio, 16.7 million colors with 100% of sRGB coverage, 4 milliseconds response time, 100 Hz refresh rate, HDR 400 support in AMD FreeSync. The EX3501R has an 1800R radius, and for video connectivity it offers two HDMI 2.0, a DisplayPort 1.4, and a USB Type-C with alternate display mode. For USB hub, it offers a 3.0 hub with 1 up and 2 down. The EX3501R offers 60 millimeters of height adjustment and 20 degrees total tilt. It does not offer any pan or pivot functionality on the stand. Additionally, the EX3501R supports a flicker-free backlight and low blue light mode to reduce eye strain, and Brightness Intelligence Plus to automatically adjust brightness, contrast, and the color palette to match the color profile and ambient lighting of your room. BenQ calls this collection of features eye care. So the BenQ EX3501R has an impressive resume, but how does it perform? The answer is exceedingly well. The picture is beautiful, vibrant, and smooth. I didn't detect any tearing even when using an NVIDIA GTX 1080, which doesn't support FreeSync. This is my first real usage of a higher refresh rate screen, as I've been more of an aspect ratio and resolution snob in the past rather than a frame rate snob. I've been enthralled with ultra-wide panels since the first 34-inch models hit the market with a resolution of 3440 by 1440. With resolution and pixel density being more important to me than refresh, I don't play shooters, I've stayed at 3440 by 1440 at 60 Hz rather than drop to 2560 by 1080 in a higher refresh rate. Panel technology has advanced recently, so now I can experience high refresh, high field of vision, and high resolution, and I couldn't be happier. Now I understand why people love high refresh rate monitors, and going back to a slower refresh rate panel will be painful. I tested the panel with the Spyder Elite Plus and found the results to be outstanding. The default color setting normal comes in at 6300 degrees Kelvin, which is very close to the RGB standard of 6500 degrees Kelvin. The fourth gamma preset hits the magic gamma reading of 2.2. Color accuracy was okay with a delta E average of just over 3. You can see a number of darker colors overshooting the mark in the detailed 48 color analysis here. Overall, the Spyder gave the panel 4 pucks out of 5. Calibrating the panel resulted in the same 4 puck rating, but showed significant improvements in many areas. Oddly, the tone response was degraded to a gamma of 2.3. Looking at the color uniformity, we see much greater consistency, with the 1F blue being the major offender. I remember this color being an issue for other panels I've tested as well. After getting these technicalities out of the way, I spent some time gaming on the BenQ EX3501R, and my experience was amazing. The screen is vibrant and the image is smooth thanks to the low response time, high refresh rate, and zero flicker backlight. While VA panels can wash out when viewed off-axis, the 1800R curve in the EX3501R ensures that this won't be a problem for the viewer given the size of the panel. During my testing, I installed and benchmarked Middle-earth Shadows of War. One of the configuration steps is to adjust the brightness and contrast while viewing a test image on the screen. Rather than fiddle with this manually, I decided to turn on the Brightness Intelligence Plus feature to see what would happen. And what happened was a little bit of magic. An eye icon appeared on the screen with the monitor HUD along with the room brightness indicator. The screen auto-magically adjusted itself and the reference image looked perfect. Along with this little bit of automated magic, I also want to talk about two other automated features, HDR and FreeSync. Enabling actual HDR doesn't require any changes to the monitor settings. Once you enable HDR in Windows 10 or in a game, the display automatically detects the HDR feature set and enables it. If your game supports the feature, you can enable HDR in-game while staying with SDR for your Windows desktop experience. For example, F1 2017 supports this feature. The HDR experience on the Windows 10 desktop can leave a little bit to be desired, with Explorer and browser windows looking gray and colors looking faded overall, even with the brightness compensation maxed out. Additionally, the BI Plus technology will automatically adjust the brightness, contrast, and color palette of the monitor to optimize the HDR experience. without requiring you to fiddle with settings for each game. Given that HDR is a bit hit or miss at this point, this automation greatly smooths out the user experience. And finally, there's AMD FreeSync. Plug in an AMD GPU and it will detect the FreeSync enabled monitor and turn on the setting in the Radeon software. There's no setting on the monitor to configure itself. Now, after spending some time with the automated features of the BenQ EX3501R, I wanted to see how these fared in testing with the Spider. One thing to note is that when BI Plus is enabled, most all of the brightness, contrast, and color controls are disabled on the monitor. It's driving, not you. I used the Spider in two lighting conditions. One was a dimly lit room with afternoon daylight coming in through my office blinds, overall a neutral to cool color profile. The second was a brighter room with the soft white bulbs and my ceiling fan turned on. It was a brighter and warmer ambient color profile. In both instances, the Spider rated the panel at 4 pucks with markedly good scores in all areas but tonal response. The gamma was measured at 1.9 in both instances, with the curve oscillating around the 2.2 standard. The screen produced just under 100 nits of brightness in the darkened room and just under 150 nits in the bright room. This compares to the 200 nits produced at 50% brightness when set manually. White points in both tests were excellent, and color accuracy produced a delta E result of about 2.25, an improvement over the 3.1 in the uncalibrated monitor. Some interesting points on this is that both profiles are different from each other and very different from the native uncalibrated profile of the monitor, showing that the Brightness Intelligence Plus feature is indeed working. The Spider calibrated values appear to be better due to a lower average and max delta E values, but the BI Plus feature produces a more consistent result at each measurement with a smaller standard deviation for each color. Overall, I think Brightness Intelligence Plus does a great job of dialing in your monitor in real time without any real user intervention. It's not as accurate as the Spider Elite 5 Plus, but you also don't have to spend the $275 for the hardware and software, nor do you have to take the time to calibrate and then recalibrate your monitor. The monitor offers great real-time adjustments with the BI Plus feature, no matter your lighting. And if you turn BI Plus off, you can dial in almost a perfect white balance and gamma with the factory presets. Personally, I'd leave BI Plus enabled to respond to varied brightness and lighting conditions throughout the day. Being a high refresh rate monitor, you'll want to know if you can take advantage of this feature with your current hardware. To get the benefit of a 100Hz panel, you don't need to average 100 frames per second in a game, just something north of 60 frames per second. I don't have a ton of video cards to test with. My personal rig is an AMD Ryzen R7 1700 with an EVGA 1080 hybrid. This isn't the top of the NVIDIA stack, but it's pretty close to it. For AMD testing, I purchased a Sapphire Radeon RX Vega 56. Now, I realize these two cards aren't directly comparable. The Vega 56 is more in line with the GTX 1070, not a 1080. However, GPU prices are still high, and between the Vega 56 and the 64, the Vega 56 is considered the better value and the better buy. This first chart shows the average frame rate for 10 games at ultra, very high, and high presets. If a bar is missing, that means the game didn't offer a preset with that name. As you can see, the GTX 1080 routinely pushes games north of 60 frames per second, often averaging 70 to 90 FPS. With this average FPS, you'll often have less demanding areas approaching 100 frames per second. If you'd like to take a closer look, pause the video before we move on to the Vega 56. The RX Vega 56 is a bit more of a mixed bag. There are a handful of games with averages above the 60 frames per second mark, but many of the games average right around 60 FPS. Again, this means that less demanding areas will have higher frame rates. Luckily, the BenQ EX3501R comes with FreeSync, which will smooth your gameplay experience, particularly below 60 frames per second. If your performance falls below 48 FPS, which it will in Shadow of War or GTA 5 on max settings, the panel goes into a frame doubling mode to help improve the user experience. While we hope future AMD GPUs will catch up with NVIDIA performance, you can routinely drive 3440 by 1440, almost 5 million total pixels at an average 60 frames per second with the RX Vega series. The NVIDIA GTX 1080 provides plenty of power, and you may even be able to hit frame targets with a 1070 or 1070 Ti depending on your game. Monitors are a long-term investment, and while you may not be able to fully take advantage of every feature today, future GPUs and maturation of the HDR ecosystem will help. There's obviously a lot to like about the BenQ EX3501R, but are there any downsides? Yes, there's a few small ones. First, I wish the monitor stand had a bit more flexibility, and I wish the panel came ready for VESA mounting. For VESA mounting, you have to contact BenQ for an adapter. I wish the ports were rear-facing instead of downward. It's a bit of a pain to get cables plugged in without laying the panel down. The menu system in the monitor HUD is serviceable, but the individual downward-facing buttons are a bit fiddly. Their markings are minimal, which helps the overall sleek aesthetic, but it makes navigation a bit tricky. Overall, these issues won't be a problem after initial setup and are really no more than nitpicks, though I do wish all monitor manufacturers would move to rear-facing ports. The only lasting negative is the limited HDR implementation. True HDR requires a 10-bit color palette and 1000 nits of brightness. The VA panel in the BenQ EX3501R provides true 8-bit color depth and a peak brightness in HDR mode of 400 nits, which meets the entry-level Display HDR 400 PC specification as defined by VESA. Linus from Linus Tech Tips calls the HDR 400 and HD 600 levels HD aren't, and while I would like to see support for 10-bit color, I genuinely question the need for 1000 nits of brightness in a PC display. PC monitors are generally used in a smaller room compared to a living room, and with a much closer viewing distance. In testing the BenQ EX3501R, the SDR mode peak brightness of 350 nits was blinding in a dark room. With 1000 nits of peak brightness, I worry that I might need sunscreen. The HDR 400 support in the EX3501R is indeed entry-level HDR, but it looks beautiful. Given that HDR support in games is in its infancy, I would say that the panel matches the maturity of the ecosystem. Considering the full feature set, which includes high resolution, high field of vision, and a high refresh rate with AMD FreeSync, the $800 BenQ EX3501R is a great value, is highly recommended, and should serve you well for years to come. Thanks for watching, and thanks as well to BenQ for providing the EX3501R for review, and thanks for their patience while I got this out. I like to spend plenty of time with the monitor, really living with it for a while rather than just reviewing in a week or two. Thanks for watching. If you liked the monitor review I did here, be sure to check out my others. I've got several large 43-inch 4K reviews up. Be sure to subscribe. If you have comments, questions, or feedback on the review or the monitor, be sure to leave those in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we will see you soon.